thank you, Yaniv. Thank you so much. It makes me want to stay on for another few weeks, you know. Chaval to miss out. Okay. Let me just formally say thank you to Yaniv and Chazaq. It's really a zechut to be able to speak for such an organization. We see so many things from Chazaq in the UK. We have our own Chazaq in the UK with a K, not with a Q. But we spell it wrong, okay? There's a lot of things we spell wrong in the UK. What can I tell you? But anyway, I want to thank you personally, Yaniv, for the opportunity. And hopefully it'll be worth it, because at the moment it is 25 to 2 in the morning, my local time. So if I drop off in the middle of the lecture, just give me a quick shake, wake me up, and I'll try and remember where I left off. Okay. So I literally just arrived from the UK this afternoon. And a funny thing happened to me when I got the plane from Manchester. So, as it happens, this flight that I took this morning was not direct. I flew from London to Manchester. Many of you might have heard of Manchester. And from Manchester to JFK. Now, it was too early for me to daven when I left London. It was about 4 in the morning. So when I got to Manchester, it was perfect time for me to daven shacharit. So what could I do? I had two options: either to put my tefillin on in the lobby, in the hotel, hotel, because I'm already starting to flag. In the airport, in front of everybody, which I've done before, by the way. I did it once in Dubai. I wouldn't recommend doing it in any Arab country, because, anyway. Or I could find what they call the prayer room. Many airports have private prayer rooms. You can go, people of any race or religion can go and pray. Fine. So I thought, you know what? Let's try the prayer room. So I went, I found where it was, took a look inside, because very often in these prayer rooms you get certain oddities, of other religions which may not be compatible with our religion. So I went in, I scoped it, I checked it out, fine, no crosses, nothing topical, no problem, okay? So I'm facing the wall, and the room is behind me, loads of chairs behind me. I'm putting on my talit, I'm putting on my tefillin, and I hear somebody behind me. And I'm thinking, it could be anybody. It could be a Christian, it could be a Muslim, it could be a Buddhist, it could be anybody. And at this moment, they're watching me praying, and I'm feeling extremely uncomfortable. So I decided, you know what? I'm not going to be able to daven properly until I find out who it is. So I took the chance, I turned round, and lo and behold, facing me in this multi-ethnic prayer room was a Hasidic Yid. Of all people. He said, Shalom Aleichem, I said, Shalom Aleichem, and we both davened together. Why am I telling you this? No real reason, other than I wanted to share it with you, but I was thinking about it. So many times things happen min hashamayim, b'sheret, through, I don't know what other way to put it, I don't know how you can even say it in English, and that we take these things for granted. I mean, here I was, in the middle of an airport in Manchester, which is not a Jewish, not so Jewish, not as Jewish as where I come from, Edgware, in northwest London. And here is a Hasidic Yid, literally me and him praying together. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, he brought his wife as well. So it was a bit odd. So it was me and this Hasidic Jew and his wife, all three of us praying in this room where Muslims could have come in, Buddhists. Anyway, so I live to tell the tale, that's the main thing. So many times things happen to us min hashamayim, we take it for granted. I think this week's parasha shows you what a mistake that is, to take things like this for granted, to take these quirks of fate. let me share with you a few points about this week's Parsha, which is Parshas Vayechi. And then either I'll let you go early or I'll fall asleep, one of the two, whichever comes first. So in the beginning of the Parsha, that chapter 47, verse 29, the scene is set. Yaakov Avinu is with Yosef, his son, his beloved son of his old age. And Yaakov is on his deathbed. And he's telling Yosef, don't bury me here in Egypt. Do the right thing. Bury me in Eretz Israel. So I talked about this in my last share, that this chesed, the chesed of affording somebody a burial, a Jewish burial, is what's called chesed shel emet. It's a chesed of the highest order. It is a chesed that is unparalleled. Why? Because whatever kindness you can afford somebody who's passed away, or for the cause of somebody who's passed away, can never be repaid, for obvious reasons, because the person's dead. He can't say thank you, he can't pay you back. So it's of the highest order because it cannot be reciprocated. Let me share with you a story. Normally I tell my stories at the end, but just in case I don't make it to the end. Let me share with you a story that admittedly I've told this story before, but it's just too amazing not to say it again, so you'll excuse me if you might have heard it before. There was a story about a certain Jew who was a survivor of the Holocaust. And like many people who went through that terrible trauma, that experience very often left people bereft of any religious dedication, religious affiliation. People who were from religious families after the war left everything behind. Now, the worst thing you can do is to judge a person, because Shalom Leidam, we should not know from these things. We cannot even put ourselves in the shoes of people who went through the Holocaust. So I'm definitely not going there. I'm definitely not judging. But this fellow, for whatever reason, he decided to cast off the yoke of his religion. And he lived in Israel. And he was from a religious family originally, before the war. And on the day before Yom Kippur, 1952, this fellow had a dream. And in his dream, his father appeared. And his father was dressed in a talit. And he told his son, look, you're doing the wrong thing. You've given it all up. It's not going to do you any favors. Come back to your religious roots. Yeah, and then the fellow wakes up. You know, when you have a dream like that, it could be something I ate, it could be something, maybe I was thinking about something before I went to sleep. No, so the guy dismisses it. But then he has a dream again, and again. And apparently there's two slightly different versions of the story, that he had the dream 7 times. Another version says that he had it a number of times, and then he actually came back to his house. I think they said it was Erev Yom Kippur, and he literally saw his father sitting in the chair in his house. Okay, so again, I can't verify the truth of that particular part of the story, but anyway, the fellow was a little bit freaked out by these multiple dreams. He didn't know what to do. He heard about a famous religious Jew, a rabbi who lived in Bnei Brak at the time, by the name of the Chazon Ish. So somebody said to him, look, go and see the Chazon Ish. Speak to him, tell him about the dream. He goes to the Chazon Ish. He tells him everything that transpired. No, sorry. He goes to the Chazon Ish. He enters the Chazon Ish's room. Before he even opens his mouth to say anything, the Chazon Ish says, you machal Shabbat, you don't keep Yom Kippur, you've thrown away the yoke of your religion, why are you doing this? And the fellow's like, I haven't even said anything. And he knows the whole story. So the Chazon Ish, again, before the fellow opened his mouth, he said, you know, you have on you a din of chayv karet. There is a death sentence on you. I can see it. So at that point, the fellow opens up and tells him the whole story. They had these dreams, and whatever. So now the Chazon Ish says, look, I can see you have this gezerah, this decree on you, but something's stopping it from happening. There is something that you've done, some merit, that's keeping you alive. You must have done some mitzvah. Can you tell me, is there anything you can think of, any mitzvah that you've done that you think is noteworthy? So the fellow thinks, he says, look, Rabbi, I'll be honest with you, I'm not very observant. But what I do is I give tzedakah on a regular basis. Chazon Ish says, no, that's not enough to keep a gezerah of chayv karet. You must have done something. Think back. Maybe it was a number of years ago. So the fellow thinks, he says, you know what? I do remember something. When I was a young boy, maybe 14, 15 years old, my father was a member of the Chevra Kadisha, which is the burial society. And I came home and I saw my father was in conversation with a young woman. And this young woman was sobbing to my father that her son had died. A young boy. And she wanted to know what's going to happen. Where's he going to be buried? So my father turned to me and he said to me, look, you have to go collect the body of this young boy and bring him and we will bury him. So I went on my father's instruction in the middle of the night through terrible danger. It could have been Nazis, it could have been anybody. A young boy, 14, 15 years old, and I took the boy and I put him in a bag on my shoulder and I came back and we buried this young boy. The Chazon Ish said, that merit is what's keeping you alive now. Because chesed shel emet is so important. It's unlike anything. And this fellow, you know, like all these popular stories, this fellow, you know the ending. He comes back to Frumkeit and etc. That's not really the point. The point is that this is one of the greatest mitzvahs anybody can be involved with. There are countless stories about people being involved with Meit Shel Mitzvah, with the Chevra Kadisha, with the burial society. And they always end up well. They always end up where the person who's performing the chesed always ends up in a better place. So that's how the parsha starts out. Yaakov wants his son to perform this chesed shel emet when Yaakov will die. Now, what is very strange in this, there's a number of strange things in this week's parasha, but what is very strange is that Yaakov does not include Yosef in the list of the tribes. The list of the tribes that were going to be mentioned, placed on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. Instead, he brings, or he promotes, Yosef's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. We know this. Ephraim and Manasseh were second generation. All the other tribes are first generation from Jacob. Manasseh and Ephraim are second generation. They are the grandsons of Jacob. So the plain and simple question is, why? Why not just make Joseph like his peers? Reuben, Shimon, Levi. Joseph was one of the brothers. Put him on the breastplate. You bring his two sons and you leave out the father. So Rav Shimshon Rafal Hirsch gives an amazing reason. He says you have to understand who, or rather what a relationship, what a special relationship Yosef had with his father and what his father had with Yosef. Because Yosef was one of two brothers who were the sons of Yaakov's most beloved wife, his Ahuvah, his first choice. Before any of this thing with Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah, she was his first love, if you can apply such a thing, which you can't really, but just to give some meaning to the relationship. I can't think of another way of putting it. And she died early. If I'm not mistaken, from memory, she was 36 when she died. Yeah, she was. That's like not even half a life. So Yaakov wanted to immortalize his wife. How would he do that? By making the two sons of Yosef into tribes in their own right. That way he would capitalize on the legacy of his son Yosef, and ultimately he would capitalize on the love that he had for his wife Rachel. And look at the nachas that Rachel had even after 36 short years of her life. Look at this. She had a son called Yosef. Yosef, for all intents and purposes, was running the world. Okay, he was second in command to Pharaoh. But we all know, Yosef was running the show. Yosef was the one who dispensed food to the entire world. That's for one. What was Rachel's other son? Binyamin. If you look in the Midrash, Binyamin was one of 4 individuals who literally never sinned in their entire life. Can you imagine living an entire life not having one sin, not even one Lashon Hara? Yeah, nothing. The only reason why he died was because of the sin of the snake in the Garden of Eden. That's the only thing they could pin on Binyamin. Otherwise he would be immortal. So one son runs the world, one son never sinned, and Yosef's children, Ephraim and Manasseh, that's how we bless our children. Yisimcha Elokim ke'Ephraim v'Manasseh. Now what about Binyamin? Binyamin had 10 sons. So the nachas increases exponentially. So Yaakov capitalizes on this by making Ephraim and Manasseh tribes in their own right. And this is what I like to call posthumous nachas. This is nachat that Rachel Imenu received after she died. And there's a famous question. Why do we bless Ephraim first? Yisimcha Elokim ke'Ephraim v'Manasseh. Who was older? Manasseh. So it sounds like a bit of a, it's not na'im. You go with the older one first. Now there's many answers to this. I've discussed many answers in previous shiurim. One answer, which I saw just today, is there was a distinct difference between Ephraim and Manasseh. Manasseh was born when Yosef still remembered his father's house. He still remembered, being his father's beloved, learning with his father, learning all the halachot of Eglah Arufah, all these beautiful things, the connection he had with his father. But by the time Ephraim was born, already there was a few years had gone past. Now, although Yosef was never part of the life in Mitzrayim, he was already acclimated towards the life in Mitzrayim. And that was shown by the name that he gave to his second son, Ephraim, because Ephraim contains the letters Pei, Resh, Ayin. What name does that sound like? Put them together, think. Paro. Now, of course, God forbid, you're not going to compare Yosef's son to Paro. But Paro apparently was like, those letters were part of, they formed many of the names in Egypt. Like many of the names had those 3 letters there. Like Lahavdil, you have in the Russian or Bukharan community, the suffix of, like Romanov, Issakarov, or where I come from, I'm a Mashhadi Jew, we have Ian, like Kalatian. So the letters Pei, Resh, Ayin were very common. So Ephraim had a name that was indicative that he was already part of that society in Mitzrayim. So already he was that bit of more step away from the life in Eretz Yisrael with Yaakov Avinu. So, Potiphera. That is amazing. That is amazing. Pei Reish Ayin. Did you just think of that now? Baruch Hashem, you got it on camera. Beautiful chidush. Potiphera. Pei Reish Ayin. Beautiful. Chazaq u'Baruch. So already Ephraim was that much further away, so he needed more chizuk. He needed a stronger bracha because he had more of a trial. He already had less of that influence, of that influence. Shefa? No. Hashpa'ah, thank you. Twice in a row. Beautiful. He had less of the hashpa'ah than Menashe had. So that's another reason why Ephraim was brought and had the bracha first, because he needed more of the strength of the bracha. Now, if you look forward in the parasha, 48 verse 20, listen to how this bracha plays out. And I quote, Leimor b'chai v'rech Yisrael, Leimor yisimcha Elokim ke'Ephraim v'Menashe, v'yasem et Ephraim lifnei Menashe. No, that's not the one. Oh, it's 19, the one before. Let me just quote the right part. V'amayin aviv v'omer yadati b'nei yadati, gam hu yeh la'am v'gam hu yigdal v'ulam, achiv hakaton yigdal v'menu v'zaro yeh melo hagoyim. Oh, no, I was right. V'yvarachem bayom hahu. That's what. I'm starting to flag now, really. I'm starting to lose my concentration. So the pasuk says, so he blessed them that day. Yaakov blessed his grandsons on that day. Simple question. Who cares? Why are you telling me that day? What, he blessed them yesterday? I thought he blessed them tomorrow? What do you mean? Of course he blessed them that day. So why mention this seemingly not necessary point in the parasha? You're saying today. I know it's today. So there's an important lesson that comes out here. Because to be a Jew who is firing on every cylinder, who's doing things the right way, it has to be today. It has to be strike while the iron is hot. In other words, what Yaakov was blessing his grandchildren was, you know, when you receive inspiration, when you have, when you feel inspired, strike while the iron is hot. Don't let the inspiration go, because as soon as you let that inspiration go, you will never act on it. So in other words, if you feel inspired, go and do a mitzvah. Go and do something positive. The longer you leave it, the less impact it will have on you. And we know this. It's called procrastination. A person who well, I can't even say it now. A person who procrastinates will never be a productive person. You know, we see this time and time again. If you put a bit of space between what you should be doing, it just tends to fade away. You know, the Yetzer Hara comes to you and he cools you down. And he says, don't worry. We can do this tomorrow. And you say, no, I feel inspired. I want to do the mitzvah now. It's okay. It's all right. Take a bit of a breather. Take a rest. Do it tomorrow. And then when tomorrow comes, okay, I'm going to do the mitzvah. Nah, it's okay. It's all right. You know what? Recoup your energy and do it the next day. And it goes on and on until, forget it. When the inspiration comes, when the thought comes to do a mitzvah, do not delay. Al tachmitzenu. Don't let it become like chametz. Because that's the difference between a Jew who performs and a Jew who's out of the game. Because it's only a spark. Very often, you know, the Gemara says, I wasn't going to say this, but the Gemara says in Shabbat Daf Mem Beit Amud Beit, if I'm not mistaken, 42b, says Nitzotzot, which means sparks, Ein Bahem Mamash. They do not have any substance. Because the Gemara there is talking about sparks, are they muktzeh? If they fall on a plate, can you move the plate? So the Gemara says, no. They're not muktzeh. You can move the plate. Why? Because sparks are insubstantial. As soon as they fall on the plate, they go out. So I wanted to suggest like this. A spark is like an inspiration. You have some sort of feeling to do a mitzvah. You feel on a high. Unless you grab it while it's in the spark stage and you give it something to ignite, it's going to go. A spark can either go out or it can catch a piece of dry wood or a piece of straw, and you could make a torch. You can make something which will be sustainable. But a spark by itself, it fills out. Ein b'hem mamash. It doesn't have any substance. It's the same with inspiration. Unless you catch it and give it something to grab hold of, you've lost it. You've lost it, and it will never come back. It's such a chaval. So that's what Yaakov was saying. Do it that day. Don't procrastinate. Strike while the iron is hot. Now Yaakov blesses all his sons, not just his two grandsons. He blesses all his sons. Reuven, Shimon. Some he gives rebuke, and some he gives just straight brachot. The bracha that he gives to Yisachar is very interesting. We turn now 49 verse 14. And there's a lot of animals here. Yaakov Avinu is blessing Yehuda. He calls him Gur Aryeh, you're like a lion. One is like a hind, one is like this. What's going on? Yisachar is no different. Says verse 14, Yisachar chamor gorem. Imagine this, you're blessing your son. What would you bless your son with? May you be like the Chavetz Chaim. May you be like the Rambam. How does Yaakov bless his son? Yisachar was one of the paragons of Torah. He says, Yisachar, you're like a donkey. What type of bracha is that? Would you bless your children like a donkey? Now, chas v'chalila, we should cast any aspersions on Yaakov Avinu. But why was he calling his son a donkey? You know why? And not just any donkey, a strong-boned donkey. Because a donkey is different from any other beast of burden. Let's compare him to a horse. A horse is very fast. Horse can also carry a burden. But a horse is different from a donkey. A horse, when it carries its burden and it wants to rest, you have to take the burden off the horse, and then the horse like runs around and, has a bit of a freak out. Yeah? That's how it rests. But a donkey, when it wants to rest, you don't have to be porek all. You don't have to take off the burden from the donkey. The donkey has to rest with the stuff on his back. A donkey is, it's a strange way of putting it, but a donkey is a workhorse. A donkey works all the time. Even when it's at rest, it still has the burden on its back. That is the bracha that Yaakov was giving his son. Because a donkey is never porek all. He never casts off its burden. A ben Torah, somebody who learns and practices Torah, when it comes to ben azmanim, what does he do? Does he throw off all his Torah and says, now I'm on vacation? It's the Xmas holidays, I'm going to have a party? Yeah, or does he come and sit in a shiur like you with Rabbi Kelaty, or Bezrat Hashem, December the 31st with Rabbi Wallerstein? A ben Torah never casts off his burden. That's endemic, it's characteristic of a ben Torah. There's no holiday for us. Like my old Rosh Hashiva used to say, how did you put it? A change is as good as a rest. You don't have to stop doing what you're doing all year round and then do nothing. Just change. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz says a beautiful thing. He says, you know, there's no such thing as Bein Hazmanim. You know this phrase, Bein Hazmanim? When people are in yeshiva or in kollel, they learn for, let's say, 9 months of the year, and 3 months of the year they have Bein Hazmanim. It's between the semester. So they have a summer semester, a winter semester, and they have a time where they're off kollel, they're off, and they do what they do. Rav Chaim Shmulevitz says, Chas v'chalila, you should call it Ben HaZmanim. You should call it Zman HaBenayim. Because the holiday, the vacation is also a Zman. It's just, this Zman you do this, and that Zman you do that. It's not a case of this Zman you do this, and this Zman you do nothing. You kick your feet up, you go to Florida for 3 weeks, and sit by the pool. No. Okay, everyone deserves a vacation. But to cast it all off, that's not what the Ben Torah does. We change. So we don't learn as furiously as we learn all year. Okay, so we learn something else, something a bit lighter. Maybe we involve our children. We involve our spouses, dare I say. You can have a chavruta with your wife or with your husband. Nothing wrong with that. But we don't cast it off. We don't have either yes, it's not black and white with us. That's what Yaakov was blessing with his son. But there's another interesting thing. You go forward one pasuk. Vayar menucha kitov. We just talked about the donkey having a burden. The next pasuk is like a contradiction. He saw tranquility, that it was good. Wait a minute, you're a donkey with a burden, or you cast off the burden and now you want a life of tranquility? Which one is it? I'll answer this with a mashal that's given by the Chavetz Chaim. The Chavetz Chaim talks about a parable about a jeweler. And this jeweler, like many jewelers that we know, they go to countries in the Far East and they buy large quantities of diamonds or whatever, and they bring them back and they sell them for a huge profit. In London we have a place called Hatton Garden. That's where all the Jews have their little businesses and they sell precious stones, etc. So this jeweler goes to a country in the Far East with a nice big fat amount of money, that's to buy goods, and he has a smaller amount of money that he uses for his expenses. So let's say $5,000 to buy the goods, and maybe $300-400 for a hotel, to have some nice meals, just to get the, so it shouldn't be too much like work the whole time. So he goes, he has a very successful day buying the diamonds, and he's on his way back, and he sees one of his fellow traders. And this fellow says to him, "Nu, how did you do?" He says, "Fantastic, I spent all my money, $5,000, I bought Chaval Azman, the most amazing stock." The fellow says, "Really? I didn't have so much luck." "Why, what happened?" He says, "Whatever I bought, I'm getting hassled by the authorities, I'm getting investigated by this one and that one. Basically, the long and the short of it is, whatever I bought, I have to sell quickly. I don't mind even selling it without a profit. I don't mind even losing on it. I cannot go back with all this stock. I have to sell it chick-chack. So will you buy something from me?" The fellow says, "Look, I had 5,000, I spent every penny." So the other guy says, "Look, you haven't got anything on you? I'll take anything. I literally have to get rid of this. I can't go back with this stock." The fellow thinks, he goes, "You know what? I bought with me $300-400 for expenses. I've spent a little bit of it. I'm not going to spend all of it. Look, I'll tell you what. I'll give you $200. Is it going to help you?" He says, "You know what? Whatever you give me is good. I'll take the $200. Take all this." So now the guy's going, "Wow, that's amazing. I bought $5,000 worth of stuff, and now for $200 I bought almost the same amount again." So this guy is on top of the world. And the guy was literally pushing it on him. Yeah, so it was almost like win-win. But now what happens? Now this guy's got a huge amount of diamonds, but he hasn't got any money for a hotel. He's got no money to buy any food. He's left himself maybe 10, 20 bucks. So what does he do for the next few days? He roughs it. He sleeps in the park. He eats maybe a pita bread. And meanwhile, he comes home to his family, and they look at him, they see the guy, oh, he's like rosé, thin, he looks ill. So his wife says, what happened? You look terrible. He says, no, you don't understand. And he tells her the whole story. And she said, but you must have been suffering. Because even though you bought the stock, you know, you didn't eat properly, you didn't sleep properly. He goes, honey, that's the last thing on my mind. You know, all I was thinking of was, I cannot wait to get home and sell all this stock. Who cares about the hotel? Who cares about the food? This mashal of the Chavetz Chaim talks about, is a commentary on this pasuk, about seeking tranquility. Of course, everybody wants an easy life. Everybody wants to cast off that burden. But you know what? We as Jews are working for a greater goal. We've got something called Torah. We've got things called mitzvot. And you know what? If we've got those under our belts and we come to Shamayim, are we going to turn around and say, you know, it wasn't worth it. I lived 80 years, 90 years. I didn't eat well. I didn't sleep well. I got a few mitzvot. But you know, you did brilliantly. Who cares about the fact that you had to rough it for 80, 90 years? Look what you got in your hand. Look what you're taking with you. That has to be a focus of every Jew. It doesn't matter if you don't have it your way the whole time. If things aren't rosy in terms of physical sustenance. So what? You're working for the greater good. You've got all those diamonds in your pocket that you're going to take with you. You should always bear this in mind. In case things, you might feel to complain about this, to complain about that. Don't worry about that. Think about the money. That's what my wife and myself often say when we're doing, because we're photographers. We do weddings and bar mitzvahs. In case you want to bring us to New York to cover your function, we're happy to do it. But sometimes you get to a wedding and it's not as geschmack as other weddings. And sometimes it's like, you know, the people aren't so nice, and the wedding's dragging on. They might have a mitzvah tanz, which goes on to 4 in the morning. Rahman al-Islam. But anyway, it goes on, and we're tired, and it's dragging. So I turn to my wife and I say the same thing. It's not necessarily the best thing to say, but it puts a smile on her face. I say to her, look, Shelly, think about the money. Yeah, it's hard, but at the end of the day, we're making a parnasah. And that keeps it going, and it keeps me going as well. Yeah, I'm not recommending it to everybody. It's not necessarily the best attitude. But it makes sense here. Think about the Torah. Think about the mitzvot. Don't worry about the material side. That can go by the wayside. It's a bonus. If you get it right in terms of Gashmiot, all well and good. But don't expect it. Don't expect it. Okay, one more point. I'm going to finish off with a couple of stories. Time permitting. 9:15. Oh, Yvei. It's about 3 in the morning for me now, so Baruch Hashem, I've done well. So I'm literally going on Siyata Dishmaya. I'm living proof of Hashem. There's no physical reason why I should be standing here with all my faculties. I have some, not all of them, but I have some of them. Baruch Hashem. So, if we move on, final point, chapter 50, verse 21. What is this talking about here? Towards the end of the parasha. Va'ata al tirau nochi achalkel etchem ve'tamachem va'anachem otam va'adaber al libam. The scene is set. Joseph is speaking to his brothers. Now, his brothers came with this whole prefabricated story. Oh, you know, our father said don't hassle us. Don't give us a hard time because we sold you. Of course, this never happened. But that's another, I won't go into that point. Basically, Yosef ends up comforting his brother, saying, what? Chas v'chalila, I should ever do anything against you. Oh, that's the furthest thing from my mind. He was comforting them. He was saying, don't worry, I have no kapeidah. I'm not makpid on you, I'm not particular on you. Whatever happened, happened. I hold no grudge. This is not a grudge match. It's in the past. So it all sounds good. You know, there was never any, you know, he was never standing on his rights, Yosef, and his brothers felt reassured, and that should be the end of the story, khalas. Not so. Because many years later, there were the 10 martyrs, the Asirei Harugei Malchut, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Hanan ben Tradion, Rabbi Chutzpit HaMaturgaman, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, 10 of the holiest people that ever existed were killed al Kiddush Hashem. And we are told they were killed because of the sin of Yosef with his brothers. Question, wasn't that resolved? Yosef forgave his brothers. His brother said, aha, thank you very much. That's it. Why were 10 people, holy people, their lives were taken al Kiddush Hashem? They were killed in the most horrific ways, which I won't go into now. So there's one answer, and it's got some very serious ramifications. Because although Yosef forgave his brothers fully, completely, there's no question. But unfortunately, there were certain words that never came out of his mouth that should have come out of his mouth. The words I'm referring to are some of the hardest words to say for any man, for any woman, for any child. I forgive you. He never said those words, I forgive you. He never verbalized it. He may have meant it, of course he meant it. But he didn't say it formally. And because he didn't enunciate those words, that's why these 10 martyrs were killed. Now if you think about it, how many times have we been wronged in different areas in our lives? People have embarrassed us, people have been dishonest with us. Many times it happens. And you know what? At the end of the day, we forgive them. We don't want to carry this burden of achzariyut, cruelty. So we forgive them. But do we say, I forgive you? Does the person know that they've been forgiven? You might think, oh look, I don't have to say them. It's obvious I forgive you. But it doesn't always work like that. And it's evidenced by the fact that it's so hard to say those words. I forgive you. It's so hard. Ask any husband, ask any wife. I have a friend, and I checked this with his wife, because I don't believe in hearsay. He said to me, my wife and myself never, ever, ever go to bed on an argument. And he was emphatic about this. He's been married for tens of years. So I happened to meet his wife at a simcha, and I said to her, you know what David told me? He said that you never go to sleep on an argument. Is it true? I was a bit chutzpah, you know. I wanted to know. She said, absolutely true. Never have we ever gone to bed without resolving any issue that we have. I think they said 20, 25 years have been married. Now that is incredible. That is it. That is a couple who can turn around and say, you know what? I wronged you, I forgive you, and it will be accepted. But it's so important. These words, okay, what I'm saying now, it might not be right, but I'll say it anyway because it might be right. I think, in my humble opinion, the words I forgive you are more important than I love you. I put I'm sorry and I forgive you in the same category. They're both phrases that show hachna'ah, submission and humility.
Then I love you.
Okay, then. Yeah, you're right. First say I'm sorry, or from the other side, I forgive, and then you talk about love. But until a husband or until a spouse has that reassurance, she knows or he knows that they're going to get an I'm sorry or I forgive you, then the love thing doesn't have that much basis. Can you imagine? What type of love is there if your spouse doesn't forgive you? If they, no, how could you do this to me? I will never forgive you. That's love. So that has to be part of your lexicon. I forgive you and I'm sorry, in my humble opinion, I could be wrong, must come before I love you. Okay, so I'm just finishing off now. We talked about chesed shel emet, the importance of involving oneself in matters of burial, anything to do with burial society or chevra kedisha. You know, there are various ways we can fulfill this mitzvah. You can be part of the chevra kedisha that does the tahara on the dead bodies. It's not everyone's taste. My cousin's wife actually does that for women who've passed away. She does the tahara. I don't know how she does it. She's a very delicate person, but she does it because she's a tzaddiket. She's trying to get her husband to do it, and he's a little bit more reticent, more difficult for him to get involved in that. But some people can do it. It's a tremendous mitzvah. But there are many other ways you can involve yourself. You can go to the Beit HaKvarot and make up a minyan. Not the women, I should talk this way. You can make up a minyan at the Beit HaKvarot. So many times there are people who pass away, they don't even have a minyan to make kaddish for them. In the UK we have a society, maybe you have it here as well, where they will, I think they're called shomrim, where they make phone calls and they make sure there's a minyan for every person, anyone who lo aleinu passes away and have to say kaddish. Yeah? I'm sure there's something like that here. But these are mitzvahs you can get involved with. So, the story is told, and this story occurred in New York State. A few years ago, there was a salesman who was caught out in a snowstorm somewhere in New York State. Yeah? Those are the days when it actually snowed around this time of year. I mean, I got off the plane. It was 60 degrees. I couldn't believe it. I said to my wife, 70. 70. Chaval Azman. I feel like I'm in the summer. I should have bought my shorts and my t-shirt. So in those days, it used to snow during the winter. So this guy, Nebuch, who was caught out in New York State, snowed in, and he wasn't the only one. People were like stopping their cars by the side of the road, getting to anywhere where they could get a room. And by the time this poor Jewish guy, pulled up at a motel or a hotel, all the rooms are taken. And now, what's he going to do? Is he going to sleep in the car? So somebody tells him, look, there's no rooms here, but there's a nursing home up the street. Go there. Maybe they might have a spare bed for you. You could stay there overnight. Fine. He makes his way to this nursing home, and they're also full. But he pleads with the manager. There's, please, I'll sleep on the floor anyway. I can't see it. So the manager was convinced. He says, look, you can sleep in, there's a couch in my office. You can have that as a bed, no problem. The guy goes, thank you so much. The next day, the Jewish guy wants to pay the manager. He says, look, you let me have the couch in your office, least I can do is to pay you something for it. The manager says, no. He says, I'm not in the business of making money on a couch for one night. He said, but you can do me a favor. The Jewish guy goes, yeah, tell me, please. He says, I see that you're Jewish. He says, yes, that was very observant. We have a Jewish fellow who lived here, and he just died a few days ago. His name is Mr. Goldberg. And we know that he has to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, but we don't know how to go about that. If you can help us find this fellow, like a place to be buried with the Jewish burial rites, that will be enough, and I'll consider that as you've repaid me. So now the Jew goes, wow, chesed shel emet, fantastic. He says, don't worry, I'll handle it. So he makes a few phone calls, this one, that one, and there's no room in it. There's no room in this cemetery, no room in that cemetery. In the end, he speaks to the Chevra Kadisha, the Burial Society, and they said, look, we have a special plot that's only for people, literally for chesed shel emet, people who never have any surviving family members, and obviously, it's like almost like a free loan, a free a burial plot. Bring him, and we'll bury him there. Fine. So the Jewish guy slaps the dead body, and he brings him to this special burial plot, which is like a free area, and the Jewish guy tells the head of the Chevra Kadisha the name of the fellow who died, who's going to be buried there. He said, Mr. whatever is Goldberg. The guy from the Chevra Kadisha nearly fell off his chair. He says, can you tell me the name again? He says, Mr. whatever is Goldberg. He says, you're not going to believe this. 30 years ago, we were literally running out of space in this Beit Eliyahu, this cemetery. And a fellow rolls up from nowhere, donates something like $30,000 and says, put this towards a free burial plot for anyone who dies without any family dependents to pay for their burial costs. And the fellow who came in and gave that 30 grand was the fellow that you're just about to bury. You see, that's the power of chesed shel emet. I hate to use the phrase, especially in a shul, but there's relevance to it. What goes around comes around. Shelach lachmacha al pnei hamayim. Send your bread out to the waters, because you do a mitzvah, it will come back at you. You may see it, you may not see it. This fellow, of course, he didn't see it because it happened after he died. But you see the power of that mitzvah. He literally bought his own burial plot unknowingly. Yehi Ratzon, all of us should take the tremendous lessons we learned from this week's parasha. The power of chesed shel emet. And Bezrat Hashem, this year we should see the greatest chesed that Hashem can ever do for His beloved Jewish people. And that is Mashiach Tzidkenu. I mean, HaMashiach with a hey in the beginning. Melech HaMashiach. This year, without any pain. Thank you for coming and thank you for listening.